Hello, my mapping muffalatas, and this is how to. Specifically, how to draw a city, and we have been, over the course of this series, hitting on temples, building shapes, warehouses, merchant districts, and last session, a graveyard. And in the last session, I promised you that I would at least do one more chapter, this being it, talking about different types of graveyards, specifically maybe something a little bit more Mediterranean, like the way the Romans used to do it, because it's all about the Romans. Bye-bye. So, in this, and this will be a fairly quick video. If you've not seen the last one, I highly encourage you to go check it out because it will give you some context. But we spoke about graveyards, we spoke about sort of the positioning of them, we spoke about different elements that you can combine to get a really nice sort of graveyard feel. Well, what about if we're doing it alongside a roadside? And it would look something like this. I'm actually, I've got all of this crazy ink going on here. Let's kind of just dot this in a little bit. We will finish this properly, but I'm kind of actually wondering about something like this. Just meandering to or from the city. Something like, okay, we'll put some hedges and things like that alongside it, some trees, a little bit of like a doodad. And by the way, the next episode is going to be about trees, so watch that if you're curious. So the way the Romans had this is they would actually have these mausoleums, family mausoleums, where, assuming that you weren't one of the poor and you were just basically thrown in a ditch, your remains would be interred, and they were cremated. Your cremated remains were thrown in a jar, whatever, and thrown in one of these little mausoleums, and they would just litter the roadside. Look at the Appian Way, for example. So I think for this, it would be inappropriate to do little tiny gravestone markers like that. I think you could do... Whoa, that is a big eraser. I think you could do a little bit of that, almost insinuating, small tombs. I'm just going to make this brush a little bit smaller. Well, it's a 5. That should do it. But I think things like little squares. Let's do a square fading, not some kind of weird trapezoid. But little squares. And I'm going to propose making them a little bit haphazard. Like, not super planned. These things kind of cluttered up alongside the road. And if you look at the thumbnail of this video, you'll see what I'm talking about. Where it wasn't like visiting New Orleans. I don't know if you've been to New Orleans. They've got this incredible above ground graveyard outside the city, because New Orleans it was like below water level or something like that, so they can't actually inter people in a sort of conventional sense, like 6 feet underground. There's a lot of above ground stuff, but you'll notice in New Orleans that while the actual mausoleums are different sizes and the paths a little bit higgledy-piggledy between them, the Roman style was just on steroids. So what I'm doing right now is I just want to have this sense of like having a cluster like this coming up against a city, maybe petering out a little bit, maybe down the road a touch, and then we'll start getting into sort of buildings and things like that. But a sense of this has sort of grown over time, over eons, over generations, without urban planning. You know what I mean? So having like these mausoleum areas, and maybe 1 or 2 have little doors on them, like so, but kind of arranging them in such a way where it almost feels like families were like, well, there's a plot of land. Let's bury grandma right there. where they just found space and kind of occupied it, right? So my methodology here is to make it feel a little bit chaotic, even a little cramped, as people have been kind of just finding that space in between other family mausoleums. Occasionally I'm throwing on a little bit of roof detail. I'm alternating my angles, I'm alternating my sizes and my shapes. Let's get a little close to the city walls right here. And we'll kind of spill out a bulge a little bit in the middle. There we go. So it almost seems like, you know, people didn't want to be up against the city walls too much. As it starts to peter out down the road, they really don't want to be there too much. Something actually a little bit like that. We'll come down the road just a little bit more. Now, if we were going to really do this for a big city that's been here a long time, these roadside mausoleums would probably be a lot denser and a lot longer down the road too. But we're going to do something like this. Now, I mentioned when we did this graveyard that even though we're not dealing with a Christian culture here, throwing in the odd, almost cross-like shape or design totally makes sense. Also, gravestones work really well. But outside of the city, where it's more mausoleum-like, I'm actually thinking about maybe one or two little statues in there too. Might add a certain sense of reverence. So let's throw maybe, you know what, let's delete you. And let's throw one right in the middle here. And maybe statue kind of a warrior holding a spear or something. Right there. Let's kind of put in another one. Maybe reading a book or something. Kind of get a little bit of a thicker stand on that one. Here as well. A lot smaller this time. I like to exaggerate the arms just to make it really clear that I'm actually drawing a statue. You know what, let's change this to a statue too. Okay, so something like this, and just to make some of these mausoleum tops a little different and more interesting. Now, with the Roman, I was going to call them grave sites, but they're not really. But with the Roman mausoleums alongside the roads, you know, you're not going to necessarily get these well-trodden paths that where like traffic is coming and going all of the time. But I do think, at least insinuating that there is some traffic kind of like walking off the road from time to time, you know, like so, I think goes a long way to sort of showing that this is part of the roadside, you know. I do the same when we've got little buildings on the side of the roads too, and you know what's missing is just a little bush here and there, maybe a tree. This would be one of the reasons why they couldn't spread too far off the road, is if there was a lot of trees or rocks or something like that. It will help sort of frame this area. And this type of detail, by the way, I mean, look at that, for just how much it starts to really add character to that part of the city. If we now actually go down the road a little bit, add a couple of buildings, get all other trees, maybe some, you know, vineyards, that type of thing, some farms maybe further away, this is going to start to really fill out. So that's kind of how I would handle a roadside, more chaotic, done over generations gravesite. This is kind of how I would do it, and I think it has a really nice contrast to the more formal European style that we're seeing there. This feels a little bit more almost English, right? While something like this definitely, I think, feels a little bit more Mediterranean. So hopefully that very quick video gives you something to mull over. I'll be back in the next one where we're going to talk about trees. Until then, everyone, I love you very much. Thanks to my patrons, and I will see you all on the flip side.